Hey everybody, sorry it's been a while. I've got some personal and professional changes that has been happening. Did you hear I'm making a movie? And yeah, it takes a while, and it's a lot of work. And I'm still adjusting my microphone here. This is raw. This is unbridled talk here. So I couldn't get the time to make new videos for a while, but I'm back. I'm back now, and just in time for Carpentober 2022.
Carpentober.
And we're kicking off this year's event with a movie I should have kicked it off with last year since it was the first year, but better late than never, right? So get your mask and your jack-o'-lantern because we are delving into my rewatch of the 1978 horror classic Halloween, the OG movie that jump-started the popularity of slasher movies. Now, we all know Halloween wasn't the first slasher film. We have movies such as Peeping Tom and Psycho, released in 1960 to thank for the birth of the subgenre. But Halloween gave the world a template, I guess you could say. A template that was used and used and used and used. So I know you're asking, but Adam, what makes Halloween stand out more to energize a subgenre of horror than any other of the slasher films? Why didn't Psycho do it? Well, let's go over it. During this rewatch, I watched with more technical and analytical eyes. I've seen it quite a few times, and this time I was looking deeper into the movie. Let me get this out first. As horror movies go, I am not the biggest Halloween fan. And as for slasher icons, Michael Myers is on the bottom of my list of the big ones. But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it. That doesn't mean it doesn't have its merits. It's just not one I go back to a lot. And Halloween is an important picture for not just horror, but for cinema. So let's get into why. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill wrote a script called The Babysitter Murders, about an escaped criminal terrorizing a town over the span of a few days. Now, this movie had a terribly small budget, and due to those budget restraints, they changed the timeline to just one day and thought, hey, Halloween would be a great day for this all to happen. So, boom. That's where you get the skeletal structure of the movie itself. And the story is loosely based on an experience Carpenter had in college, touring a psychiatric hospital. Carpenter met a child who stared at him with the look of evil, and he said it terrified him. Almost like how later in 1984, Wes Craven came up with Freddy Krueger by using a mix of his childhood bully and seeing a stranger stand by a light post in the middle of the night outside of his bedroom. And those kind of things are cool to me. I always think characters and stories based on traumatic events, no matter how big or small, always turn into good modern fables. Another cool connection to A Nightmare on Elm Street was set decoration. Halloween being shot in the summer in California, the crew had to bring in bags and bags of dead leaves for the streets to give that, autumn effect. And Robert Englund himself revealed in an interview that John Carpenter had him throw bags of dead leaves on set for an entire day. And this was back when Robert Englund was doing, thug roles on cop shows and stuff on westerns and things before he came out really as a standout actor. Probably not until the early 80s with the V miniseries. But we're not talking about Robert Englund. If you want to talk about Robert Englund, or if you want me to talk about Robert Englund, check out the Nightmare on Elm Street thing that I did. And also, this is Jamie Lee Curtis's first feature film. Jamie Lee Curtis's. She was paid a reported $8,000 for this movie. She was mainly cast because Carpenter is a huge Hitchcock fan, and especially Psycho, which also shows in Donald Pleasance's character of Dr. Loomis, as Loomis was used in Psycho, both in the first and the second movies. Loomis was also used in the Scream movies later on. Writer Kevin Williamson was a huge Halloween fan. If you want to hear about the connections between Halloween and Scream, you can do that too in our Scream series. But it's a cool chain of respect and tribute to go on through the slasher generations. And it's funny because when Curtis finished the shoot, she felt like she did a terrible job. She fell into a depression and didn't think that she did the character of Laurie Strode any justice. And after the movie premiered, Carpenter called her to let her know that her performance was exactly what he had in mind. And a big thank you goes out to the late and great Deborah Hill for that performance, because she wrote all of the female roles, as Carpenter was very focused on doing Loomis's speeches, which were like the real heavy parts of the dialogue in the movie.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
Now, in the early casting, Carpenter approached Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play the role of Dr. Sam Loomis. They both turned him down due to low pay. Christopher Lee later went on to say that it was the biggest mistake he ever made in his entire career. Pleasance was easily the oldest and the most experienced person on the production, so understandably Carpenter was quite intimidated when they first met. Kind of like Alec Guinness in Star Wars, Donald Pleasance started the shoot by saying, "I don't know why I'm in this movie. I don't know who my character is. The only reason I'm doing this movie is because I have alimony to pay, and my daughter in England is in a rock and roll group." And she said the music that Carpenter did for Assault on Precinct 13 was cool. Unlike Alec Guinness, Pleasance and Carpenter got on really well, obviously, and they did more movies together. He did ask Carpenter, difficult questions about his character, but it turned out to be the right thing to ask. He was very good-humored about it, and he was kind of a big teddy bear on set for people. I don't think I've ever heard a bad story about Donald Pleasance. It's in his name. He's pleasant. Much like a lot of horror movies, I think the same thing happened in Nightmare on Elm Street. The connections aren't right there. Carpenter showed the finished picture to studio executives, but it didn't have the music in it. And the executive said it was boring, that there was no tension, that it wasn't going to do well. But after the movie released and with the finished score, the executives changed their mind. Carpenter's music for Halloween remains one of the most iconic movie scores and is instantly recognizable, even to people who don't know the movies. You're like, that's Halloween. Now, due to the $300,000 or so budget, $20,000 of it went to just to Donald Pleasance. Halloween thrived on Carpenter's knack to make small productions into big spectacles. The reduced lighting, the few shooting locations, and Carpenter doing the score himself were all because of keeping the budget down. All these restrictions, though, added to the magic of what makes this picture the legend that it is. Adding real tension to darkened scenes, giving the town of Haddonfield that small town feel because it had to be shot on a small scale. It was all just necessity, giving life to a movie that could have just come and gone. And that's one thing I love about movies with small budgets and directors that have a big eye. It doesn't matter how expensive the movie could be. They're going to make this movie the way it's supposed to be made. Mostly that happened with Jaws. The budget wasn't small, but everything wasn't working, so Spielberg decided to shift his production around, and it turned out to be a better movie than he initially, went for. So I just love that. I love necessity being the mother of invention. I mean, it's right there in that old saying, and it's true. Even in movies, even in art, that's what happens. Now, Carpenter's friend and eventual co-writer, Nick Castle, was just visiting the set when Carpenter talked him into playing The Shape, which is what Carpenter called Myers when he was wearing the mask. The name Nick Castle was later given to Tom Atkins' character in the 1980 Carpenter film The Fog, which I did last year. Now, Halloween will always be regarded as a classic for horror enthusiasts, but it should also be praised for its achievement in taking a small budget and widening the scope, taking the limitations given and turning out your best product. The acting, the atmosphere, the music, they're all just what gives this picture the staying power, and it's charm. This movie, in its horror roots, in its horror setting, in its slasher roots, it's charming. It's a charming film, and I don't know how to explain that. Everything just clicks all the time. It may not be my favorite horror franchise, but I still enjoy Halloween and the many movies that came from this little picture that nobody saw coming. That wasn't even about Halloween. It wasn't even about any of this. It was about killing babysitters. Thank you for watching, and I hope you come back for the next entry of Carpentober 2022. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss more of the videos in this event or any videos that we put out on the Cinemadness podcast. It also shows YouTube that we're actually being watched. Well, we're being watched by other people than me. Not that I'm a narcissist, but I do like looking at myself. And if you like hearing people talk endlessly about movies of all kinds, make sure to check out the Cinemadness podcast here. And pretty much on all streaming audio podcast platforms. I guess you can call it that. I don't know. Thank you again for watching. And remember, always celebrate cinema.